The content of this podcast is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended as, nor should it be considered a substitute for professional medical advice. Hello, this is Karen Nickel, family nurse practitioner, and you are listening to Itchy and Bitchy, a podcast that provides answers to your many health questions. I want to say before I get started that there is some major construction going on outside my home, and so I apologize for any hammering or drilling you might hear during this podcast. We'll do our best to eliminate that, but hey, life is life. Last week, I read about the findings of a recent study using the dietary supplement called resistant starch in reducing cancer risk in a specific high-risk patient population. And learning the results of this study made me ask the question, do most people know what resistant starch is and what benefits it holds? And I would guess that most people know what a starch or starchy food is, but what about resistant starch? I had dinner with some friends and family members the other day and asked them if they knew what resistant starch is and what it does, and no one could provide an answer. So, in light of these recent study results, I thought it would be helpful for you to know what this supplement is and why it can be important to include in your daily diet. Resistant starch refers to those forms of starch which escape digestion in the small bowel, and they pass on to the colon, where they are fermented, resulting in the production of short-chain fatty acids. Butyrate, one of the fatty acids, has anti-cancer properties in the colon. While this information led to initial enthusiasm as to the potential of resistant starch as an agent to prevent cancer, especially colorectal cancer, studies prior to a very recent study didn't show this benefit. The study to which I'm referring showed that eating 30 grams a day of resistant starch reduces the risk of upper gastrointestinal cancers by over 60% in people at high risk of hereditary cancers. Over 60%. I mean, it's just remarkable finding. This is the first time a nutrient has been shown to prevent these cancers in people with this hereditary condition. This study did not include finding the reason this supplement helps, but it's theorized that by changing how the gut microbiome functions, resistant starch reduces the amount of DNA damage in the gut. I'll say that again because I didn't say it very well the first time. It changes how the microbiome functions in the gut. And so resistant starch reduces the amount of DNA damage in the gut. To confirm this theory, it will have to be tested in future experiments because that wasn't part of this study. The international trial known as CAP2, CAPP2, which stands for Concerted Action Polyp Prevention 2, involved almost 1,000 patients with Lynch syndrome. And Lynch syndrome is a genetic condition that increases the risk of many cancers, including those found in the colon, brain, stomach, pancreas, ovary, small bowel, liver system, brain, kidney, and possibly breast and prostate. The syndrome is named for Dr. Henry Lynch, who drew attention to the syndrome. In the United States, it is estimated that 1 in 279 individuals have a genetic variant that is associated with Lynch syndrome. The CAP2 study found that a regular daily dose of resistant starch, it was 30 grams, as I said, also known as fermentable fiber, taken for an average of 2 years, did not affect cancers in the bowel, which is what they were actually looking for initially, but the supplement did reduce cancers in other parts of the body by more than half. This effect was particularly pronounced for upper gastrointestinal cancers, including esophageal, gastric, biliary tract, pancreatic, and duodenum cancers. More amazingly, the effect lasted for 10 years after stopping the supplement. They took the supplement for 2 years daily. They looked at the individuals 10 years later, and found that they were still receiving that benefit after stopping the supplement after 2 years of taking it. The current trial is a double-blind 10-year follow-up, and it will be supplemented with comprehensive National Cancer Registry data for up to 20 years in 369 of the participants. So we're going to get a really long-term study and knowledge of what this supplement does for us. Just to review, a double-blind study is a type of clinical trial in which neither the participants nor the researcher knows which treatment or intervention the participants are receiving until the clinical trial is over. So by setting it up this way, results are less likely to be affected by factors that are not related to the treatment or intervention that's being tested. As I mentioned, the trial found that resistant starch reduces a range of cancers by over 60%. The effect was most obvious in the upper part of the gut, as explained by John Mathers, who was the lead author of the study, which was published in the journal Cancer Prevention Research. This reduction is especially important since cancers of the upper GI tract, like pancreatic cancer, are difficult to diagnose and are often not caught early and tend to be the deadliest for people with Lynch syndrome. So decreasing risk for cancer is a very nice benefit, but foods containing resistant starch have other health benefits. First of all, it feeds our good gut bacteria. As I mentioned, once resistant starch reaches the colon, it is fermented and broken down into short-chain fatty acids and feeds our good bacteria. And in doing so, it helps our good gut bacteria thrive, which promotes a balanced gut. This increase in the diversity of gut bacteria helps control the growth of pathogens and undesirable strains and species of bacteria that have been associated with things like obesity, diabetes, and chronic disease. Resistant starch helps us stay lean. We extract fewer calories from raw and unprocessed foods that we are digesting than we do from refined and processed foods. So while a plate of whole foods and a plate of processed foods may contain the same amount of calories, we digest and absorb fewer of the available calories from whole foods than we would from processed or refined foods. Also, foods high in resistant starches tend to fill us up more quickly, so we eat less. So it has that filling benefit and decrease absorption of calorie benefit. It also improves insulin sensitivity. Resistant starch doesn't digest into blood sugar, which means our bodies don't release much insulin in response. Resistant starch might also improve insulin sensitivity by lowering blood fats. Resistant starch is also very effective at lowering post-meal blood sugar levels, and this tends to be a real problem with decreased insulin sensitivity, is this elevated post-meal blood sugar. It can also provide what we call a second meal effect. So if you eat resistant starch with breakfast, it will lower the blood sugar spike at lunch. So you'll get benefit later by eating it earlier in the day. Some studies have found a 33 to 50% improvement in insulin sensitivity after 4 weeks of consuming 15 to 30 grams per day. So it's pretty significant benefit in a very short amount of time. The importance of insulin sensitivity cannot be stressed enough. Having insulin resistance, which is low insulin sensitivity, is a major causal factor in some of our most serious diseases, including metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, and Alzheimer's disease. Because it can help improve insulin sensitivity and lower blood sugar, resistant starch may help you avoid chronic disease, which may give you a longer and healthier life. And that's what we're talking about all the time on this podcast, to help you have a longer, healthier, happier life. Resistant starches may also help to lower blood cholesterol and fats. In rat studies, it has also decreased the production of new fat cells. So not only does it help with lower the fat that's floating around in your bloodstream, but it can help prevent the formation of new fat cells. That's a biggie. Resistant starches can also increase the amount of fat we use for energy, so it helps with fat burning. It also helps to treat leaky gut and irritable bowel syndrome. I mentioned earlier butyrate and other short-chain fatty acids that are produced by fermentation of resistant starch in the colon have a remarkable effect on reducing intestinal permeability, or what we call leaky gut, which can contribute to symptoms of IBS and ulcerative colitis, which are very inflammatory processes. Short-chain fatty acids play an important role in keeping our gut wall healthy so that unwanted pathogens or particles are less likely to pass from the colon into the bloodstream. Leaky gut is associated with inflammation and autoimmune responses and many diseases, including fatty liver and heart disease. After this break, I will let you know which foods have a high content of resistant starch. Since we're talking about diet changes today, I have to add that many of us do not eat a balanced diet. As an example, over 97% of women aged 19 to 50 are not getting enough vitamin D from their diet, and 95% are not getting their recommended daily intake of key omega-3s. Ritual's Essential for Women 18 Plus multivitamin helps fill those nutrient gaps and is formulated with nutrients to help support brain health, bone health, blood health, and provide antioxidant support. Ritual invested in a gold standard, university-led clinical trial to prove the impact of Essential for Women 18 Plus multivitamin, and the trial showed that vitamin D levels increased by 43% and omega-3 DHA levels by 41% in just 12 weeks. On today's episode, I'm talking to you about the importance of gut health, and Ritual just released Synbiotic Plus, a gut health supplement with clinically studied prebiotics, probiotics, and a postbiotic, all in one minty capsule. I have started the Synbiotic Plus cap and am thrilled that one cap, once daily, contains all the key ingredients to promote gut health. Right now, Ritual is offering my listeners 10% off your first 3 months. Visit ritual.com/itchy and turn healthy habits into a ritual. That's 10% off at ritual.com/itchy. So, the moment you all have been waiting for, which foods can we add to our diet to bump up our daily amount of resistant starch? Well, let's start with oats. Oats are one of the most convenient ways to add resistant starch to your diet. 3.5 ounces of cooked oatmeal flakes, which is also about 100 grams, may contain around 3.6 grams of resistant starch. Oats, which are a whole grain, are also high in antioxidants, a double bonus. Letting your cooked oats cool for several hours or overnight could increase the resistant starch amount even more. So if you prep your breakfast at night, cook your oatmeal, let it cool, and eat it in the morning, you'll have even higher levels of resistant starch. The same thing is true when you cook and cool rice. Rice is another low-cost and convenient way to add resistant starch to your diet. One popular preparation method is to cook large batches for the entire week. Not only does this save time, but the resistant starch content is also increased when the rice is left to cool over time. Brown rice may be preferable to white rice due to its higher fiber content, and brown rice also provides more micronutrients such as phosphorus and magnesium, a triple bonus. Some other grains that can be useful and healthy are sorghum and barley, and they provide high amounts of resistant starch. Although grains are sometimes mistakenly believed to be unhealthy, with all our, keto diets and low carb diets, we've cut out grains. But natural whole grains can be a sensible addition to your diet. Not only are they a great source of fiber, but they also contain important vitamins and minerals such as vitamin B6 and selenium. Beans and legumes, which are my fave. I'm always talking about beans and legumes. They provide large amounts of fiber and resistant starch. Beans or legumes can contain around 1 to 5 grams of resistant starch per 3.5 ounces after they've been cooked. Again, it's the cooking thing. Good sources include pinto beans, black beans, soybeans, garden peas. Fava beans are an excellent source of resistant starch. When deep fried or roasted, they provide 7 to 12 grams of resistant starch per 3.5 ounces. So 7 ounces of fava beans would provide almost your 30 grams of resistant starch for your daily requirement or recommendation. Another one is raw potato starch. It's a white powder that looks similar to regular flour. It's one of the most concentrated sources of resistant starch, with about 80% of the starches in it being resistant. For this reason, you only need 1 to 2 tablespoons per day. Potato starch is often used as a thickener or added to smoothies, overnight oats, yogurt. It's important not to heat the potato starch. Instead, prepare the meal and then add the potato starch once the dish is cooled, or put it in something cool like a smoothie or yogurt. A lot of people use raw potato starch as a supplement in order to boost the resistant starch content of their diet. And some brands available that are likely to be in your grocery store are Manischewitz and Red Mill. You can get organic potato starch also at health food stores or online. Another good way to get this important nutrient is to cook and cool potatoes. If prepared correctly and left to cool, potatoes are a really good source of resistant starch. It's best to cook them in bulk and allow them to cool for at least a few hours. When fully cooled, cooked potatoes will contain significant amounts of resistant starch. In addition to being a good source of carbs and resistant starch, potatoes contain nutrients such as potassium and vitamin C. Remember not to reheat the potatoes. Instead, eat them cold. And you can always do this in a potato salad or other dishes that contain cold potatoes or cooled potatoes. When I was a kid, I remember we had, for some reason, cooked potatoes in the fridge. I'm talking about white potatoes, not those russet baked potatoes. And I would eat them as a snack. I would just cut them in half, sprinkle a little salt on them, and eat them like that. I don't know if it's because we had a shortage of snacks around our house or why we had cooked potatoes sitting in the fridge, but we did, and I snacked on them. So I probably need to get back to that. But so you can just eat raw potatoes if you care to. That's the other way to get the good resistant starch. Another one is green bananas. Now, I mean, just like raw potatoes, you're probably thinking green bananas, really, I'm going to eat green bananas. But green bananas are another excellent source of resistant starch. 2 green bananas provides 30 grams of starch. So if you ate 2 green bananas a day, you would get your 30 grams a day of resistant starch. Now, you may want to put them in a smoothie or just eat green bananas. But additionally, both green and yellow bananas are a healthy form of carbs and provide other nutrients like B6, vitamin C, and fiber. As bananas ripen, when they turn yellow, the resistant starch transforms into simple sugars like fructose. So therefore, you should aim to buy green bananas and eat them within a couple of days if you want to maximize your resistant starch intake. Now, in preparing for this podcast, I found that there is green banana powder. Now, many of you are probably out there going, Karen, I knew that. But there is green banana powder that you can also purchase and put in a smoothie or, I guess, yogurt or whatever you want to put it in. But that's an option if you don't want to eat green bananas. Another one is high maize resistant starch, and maize as in corn, M-A-I-Z-E. So it's H-I-M-A-I-Z-E, high maize resistant starch. And it's also referred to as high maize fiber or high maize flour. And it's obviously made from corn. And like potato starch, high maize resistant starch is a very condensed form of resistant starch. It can be easily added to yogurt or oatmeal, again, or a smoothie. Most commercial varieties of this product may be composed of 40 to 60% resistant starch, and the remainder is mostly digestible starch. And as with potato starch, which is very concentrated, you can use 1 to 2 tablespoons per day. Cooking and cooling other starches will increase their resistant starch content. So as with the sources I just discussed, it's best to heat them and then allow them to cool overnight. And this can be applied to starches like pasta, sweet potatoes, and corn tortillas. One time-saving technique, again, is to prepare a large batch of pasta, rice, or potatoes over the weekend, let them cool, and eat them with vegetables and proteins for complete meals during the week. The bottom line is that resistant starch is a unique type of starch with impressive health benefits. There's no formal recommendation for the intake of resistant starch. Study participants typically have received 10 to 60 grams per day. Health benefits were observed with daily intake of at least 20 grams, but an intake as high as 45 grams per day was also considered safe. And remember that the study that I've been referring to, the CAP2 study, was using 30 grams daily of resistant starch. So that might be your target goal. Many Americans get about 5 grams of resistant starch each day. Some Europeans get 3 to 6 grams a day, and Australians range from 3 to 9 grams. On the other hand, the average daily intake for Chinese people is almost 15 grams, and some rural South Africans get as many as 38 grams of resistant starch per day. Before I wrap this up, I do want to recommend that if you have family members who have had cancers, especially colon or endometrial cancers, before the age of 50, you should talk to your primary care provider about being referred to a genetic counselor to test for the genetic variant associated with Lynch syndrome. Because people with Lynch syndrome, typically when they get a cancer diagnosis, it will be at a young age, younger than 50. So if you have family members who have been diagnosed with, doesn't have to be just colon or endometrial, but cancers before the age of 50, I recommend you talk to your provider about getting some genetic testing for Lynch syndrome. And when someone is positive for that variant, it will just change the frequency of prevention monitoring like colonoscopies. It also makes it more pressing to do lifestyle changes like adding 30 grams of resistant starch daily to lower your risk of cancer through diet, since if you have that genetic variant, your risk for cancer genetically is much higher. I'm going to go cook some white potatoes and stick them in my fridge because I'm going to start snacking on that. And maybe you can do the same. In the meantime, please visit our Facebook page, INB Podcast, where you can leave more comments or questions. We love hearing from you. Our website is itchyandbitchy.com. Many thanks to Ritual for sponsoring today's episode. As always, thanks to Forrest Wenzel, our producer and composer of our theme music, Check out his album called An Awful Lot. Go to wherever you stream your favorite music to listen. And if you don't know where to stream music, you can find the album on Apple Music or Spotify. As always, remember that your health is in your hands.